road trip gave me the time I needed to study up on the Panda King. Born penniless, he was fascinated by the fireworks rich noblemen set off every New Year's. He spent a decade learning the art. But when he tried to offer his fireworks to the noblemen, they couldn't see past his shabby clothes and chased him away. Humiliated, the Panda King took revenge on those who shunned him by using the very tools of his art for crime. The Fiendish Five recruited him as their demolitions expert, and from then on, his explosive touch became feared worldwide. He's rumored to be perfecting some new firework technique high in the unstable Kunlun Mountains of western China.
Greetings, I'm Solidus-Skully, and welcome back to more Sly Raccoon action. And it's Christmas! Fa-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la. Well, I mean, I say this, but we're in the month of December, and right now in Australia it is kind of sweltering hot right now, so the fa-la-la-la-la-la-la-la Winter Wonderland comparison doesn't really hold any water. But anyway, I'm just rambling. Fourth hub world of the game, and this... well, I guess next to Mugshots level, it's probably one of my favourite levels in the entire game. Well, hub world areas, so to speak. Whatever, I'm getting off topic. Now it's time to face off against Kung Fu Panda, the Panda King. Actually, this came out before Kung Fu Panda, so... I don't know, I guess DreamWorks is in for some trouble with Sucker Punch if they ever decide to sue, although... I will say that the Panda King probably makes for a little bit more compelling of a character than... oh my god, I think I forgot the name of the character in the... oh god, I forgot the name of the thing itself. Well, never mind about that. It is now time for some more storyline and why the Panda King is not really so sympathetic as we might think. What do I mean? Well, enjoy this.
Would you look at that? A fireworks show! Oh my gosh, that's awful! That poor village just got buried in freezing snow!
The rocket came from that giant statue, and you can bet the Panda King lit the fuse. I've got to find my way up there and fast, before that lunatic squashes another town.
Yeah, a lot more of a dangerous threat than some of the stuff we've already encountered. I mean, I guess you couldn't really get that big of a threat beyond raising the dead like Miss Ruby did, but... yeah, burying an entire village of snow, murdering dozens, destroying God knows how many bits of property, and causing a major disaster. Oh, but the Panda King got bullied, so we should respect him. Well, no. But then again, that's the kind of thing that I've always loved about Sly Raccoon, as I think I've mentioned earlier. It's the fact that the game goes out of its way to give its villains a decent amount of backstory, but at the same time, just because they had a tragic backstory, it doesn't go out of its way to make them sympathetic, which, again, as I already brought up last time with a whole horror movie example of how they try and... I guess how they go out of their way to not necessarily soften horror movie monsters like, you know, Jason, Michael, or Freddy. Well, not necessarily Freddy in the remake, but, again, that's just me getting off topic. I don't know, there's just this idea of trying to add backstory to, you know, certain monsters, and that, in and of itself, making them appear to be a bit less of a threat. I don't know. It's a weird balance to get right, and it's one that Sly Raccoon, I think, hits the nail on the head with. Which is actually kind of sad when you compare it to most other franchises that are intended for older audiences compared to Sly, which... actually, I'd say, in 2002 anyway, I'd say these... sorts of platformers like, you know, Ratchet & Clank, Jak and Daxter, and Sly Raccoon, when you really get down to it, are meant for more, I guess for more teenage audiences. Not explicitly so to the point where it's just, you know, mindless cursing or shooting or whatever, but more so in the sense of, you know, just including a few Sly jokes that they get under the radar. I don't know, the 2000s was always good with that sort of stuff. In any case, as for a first level, it's actually a fairly cruisy experience, which is... quite contrary when delving into the level's history. I'll delve into it a little bit later, I'll probably bring it up when I have literally nothing else to talk about. But as for anything else, again, as I mentioned earlier, this is one of my favourite levels in the entire game. I don't know if it's a combination of just the Winter Wonderland setting, or if it's... I don't know. I've always been a fan of, you know, more... would it be racist of me to say Oriental settings, because that has been offensive to some people, but I guess for the sake of... trying to use a lack of a better word, I guess I've always enjoyed the more Asian aesthetic, whether it be Japan, China, or what have you. I don't know. It's always had a bit of a unique design element to it, which again, as I said, makes for a perfect contrast with, you know, this level compared to Ms. Ruby's earlier. You have a nice sense of difference. I mean, you had the boggy, degrading bayou earlier, now you have the beautiful mountain ranges of China. Which again, as I said before, really makes Sly Raccoon, at least in terms of its levels, really have a good sense of scope. Well, not only scope, but I guess also just uniquity in its design, which, again, bit off topic, is actually one of the things that I can actually praise Devil May Cry 2 over with Devil May Cry 3, considering that you spend a majority of DMC3 in the Tim Negru. But then again, that's a can of worms that I don't even know why I brought up, really, just something I wanted to mention. Now, as you can see, this is a level where I think, as you can probably tell by the expanse of areas, this isn't necessarily a place where you're going to be finding all the clue bottles. I wouldn't say it's anywhere near as cryptic as Ms. Ruby's, although some levels can certainly give you a little bit of guff on it, but other than that though, it shouldn't be too hard, it's just a bit spacious, so you'll be travelling around a fair bit. And another thing I should also mention, this is also the level where you get the invisibility power-up, which only works if you are undetected and are standing completely still, so it's not necessarily in the same vein as Solid Snake's stealth camouflage. You can't exactly abuse it like that, although I am kind of surprised that they didn't use it as like a New Game Plus sort of power-up. No, excuse me. Well, I mean, the game doesn't necessarily do the whole New Game Plus thing, but, you know, I guess as a final power-up of the Thievius Raccoonus, I'm kind of surprised they didn't do that as a final power-up. Considering that what you get is both absolutely ludicrous and not necessarily that useful, since you're pretty much done with the game anyway. Unless, of course, you decide to go after the Master Thief sprints, but even then, that doesn't really help in that case either. I don't know, it's always been a bit of a strange thing to me. And then again, the power-up system I think would be quickly phased out by the time of Sly 3 anyway, so... Well, power-ups in the sense of getting them from clue bottles or whatever, Sly 2 still has them, but as I mentioned before, they are quite useless. Well, not necessarily useless, considering the fact that I haven't really gone out of my way to collect them all. I really only stopped after Dimitri's area in Sly 2, but yeah, don't really find them to be that useful anyway. I think it's more so the spaciousness of the hub worlds in Sly 2 that really gets me, which kind of discourages me from getting them from the clue bottles, and that is also because of the fact that ThiefNet is just a very reliable system to collect power-ups from, so yeah. You win some, you lose some, I guess. And my computer is roaring like a banshee. I hope that doesn't mean anything, but in any case, time to find some Sly trivia, which I don't seem to have. Outside of the fact that this is actually the one example where Bentley doesn't provide trivia on how to use the invisibility power-up. You pretty much have to figure that out for yourself, although you can do it by holding circle and or holding down the circle button and standing completely still. Which is, you know, okay, but, you know, Bentley could have provided instructions on how to use probably one of the most useful power-ups Sly really has at his arsenal at the moment, which only further goes to further my theory that Bentley is actually working with the Fiendish Five, conspiring against Mr. Sylvester Raccoon in pressing the circle to enter the vault code. Now, I might be wrong on this, but I do believe you get something that can greatly, well, not necessarily greatly, but it can help you with the invisibility power-up. What it is, you'll find out right now.
This just gets better and better. I'd always heard that one of your southern ancestors, Huckleberry Cooper, developed a technique to move while staying invisible. Hold down the circle button to turn invisible, then move around with the left analog stick.
Alright, it was this one. Yeah, you might think you'd be breaking the game with that, but this really isn't a power-up that takes you very far. Yeah, you can only really tiptoe with that, which, again, I would have think a better final power-up of the game would have been to have you move freely as Sly with the invisibility power-up, thus kind of mirroring the stealth camouflage suit that Snake can get in Metal Gear Solid. I don't know, it's not terrible, and in fact it can be quite useful, as will be demonstrated in the level as we see later on, but other than that though, it's... I don't know, I just find that this probably could have had a much better use. And something also to note about the Panda King is that compared to a lot of the other villains of the game, which are more like, hey, you joinks, get to work, or I see you, Sly Cooper, with my ghost magic. Yeah, the Panda King is actually very tolerant and respectful towards those who serve under him, which is a theme that you'll actually see with Jean Bisson in Sly 2. But I don't know, it does kind of add a sense of humanity towards the Panda King, who does make a return in Sly 3, as I mentioned earlier. Well, I think I mentioned earlier, but whatever. I don't know. Makes a nice little bit of contrast compared to how he treats his workers comparatively to how other villains typically tend to do. Another thing I should mention as well, and well, again, another reason why this is one of my favourite hubworlds in the game is that the ambient music here, especially for the overworld, is beautiful. I can't, like, I mean, much like with Ms. Ruby's Swamp Overworld theme, I can't get enough of this. It's beautiful music, and it is now ruined by the more generic dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun China-themed music. Well, I mean, it's not bad music, I should say. It fits the theme, I'll say that much. Which kind of reminds me of that thing Tank said in the Matrix Path of Neo. I don't know, think of it's a scene. You don't like it? Well, no, Tank, I don't. And if you tell me that again, I will kill you. Well, Tank does end up dying in the Matrix Path of Neo at some stage. I don't even know why I'm talking about that. It seems like one of the games that I mention the most on this channel is the Matrix Path of Neo. Well, I mean, it is one of my favourite games of all time, but it just seems to be a running theme. Oh well, I guess you know that it wouldn't be a Skully thing if I didn't mention the Matrix Path of Neo, because I love that game so much. Anyway, the Flaming Temple of Flame. Again, it's a level that actually does test your platforming skills a fair bit. I'd say even more so than Ms. Ruby's. It's not difficult by any stretch of the imagination, it's just a natural curve in difficulty, which I guess, considering that there's really not much else going on, I might as well talk about it now. Some early trivia from the Sly Raccoon development history. Fire in the Sky, and I'm guessing a collective of all the levels, including this one, were initially meant to be the first levels in the game. And again, as is common with most video game levels in development, this was also the first in development, so again, and something that is a bit of a common practice is that typically, when video game designers design a video game level, they usually design one of the later levels first, so that they can use all their design experience to make a relatively easy first level so that players can get to grips with what they need to do. And because the developers are experienced, they'll be able to better showcase, you know, how to teach the player what to do and how they need to play the game. However, this being the first level that was in one of the earlier stages of Sly Raccoon, yeah, when it came to QA testing the game, a lot of people found it to be far too difficult, even for the first level, which, you know, was the one where you run up to the hub world itself. And this ultimately led to this being the fourth world of the game, and thus leading to the creation of the invisibility power-up, because players had found it difficult to sneak past hazards that, well, they literally found no other way to get past. There isn't any footage of this to my knowledge, or possibly some beta screenshots as far as I know, but yeah, I wouldn't well, then again, maybe this is because I've played the game enough times to know what to do, but I wouldn't exactly say, honestly, even first up, that this would be too hard. I mean, okay, one section in, you know, the intro stage, maybe without the invisibility power-up, but other than that, I mean, considering the implementation of the, well, it is kind of bad design that if you have to take a hit anyway, in order to get past it, is sort of bad game design, but I mean, so long as you do have a lucky charm, which by the time you reach where you need to reach, you should pretty much have that at some point anyway. I wouldn't say it's necessarily that difficult, although the difficulty of this level as it stands in the final release could possibly reflect a lot of the complaints that they got, so again, I could believe that the level was initially too difficult for players to complete. But at the same time, though, it's not exactly something that I feel is... Maybe I'm just contrasting this with my experiences with other levels in the game, mostly the gimmick-based levels like, you know, smacking the cocks, as we saw in Miss Ruby's stage, and, you know, the crab minigame from Sir Raleigh's area, but it's not that difficult. But in any case, it's just more of a ramble while we collect clues, which, spoiler alert, I don't collect them all in this stage. And, well, I do shift things around in terms of clips so that, again, you will see Sly, you know, getting the clue bottle again and getting the vaults at the end of the level before, you know, we exit the stage, but Yeah, this level can be a little bit deceptively tricky on that, and as I said, I don't think it's anywhere near as difficult as Ms. Ruby's level, but it is one that can sneak up on you from time to time, and it's not necessarily... well, it's the sort of clues that are sort of veered off to the side. It's the sort of trick that I think Insomniac tends to do whenever they have gold bolts in Ratchet and Clank, where what they'll typically do is that they'll typically put it in a place where you don't think to look, and I don't know, it can lead to frustration from time to time. It's not agonizing, but it's just a bit of a pain in the ass. I don't know, that's really the only negative point of the level that I can really speak of, but other than that though, I think it is a pretty solid level for what it's worth. Not my favourite in the game, but, you know, yeah, it's pretty solid, and plus you do get to see... well, you actually get to see a bit of a slice of life thing going on with the Panda King's forces training in the temples. I don't know, I mean, it has kind of that Sonic Adventure sort of effect where, you know, it doubles as a video game level, but at the same time, you can fully believe that these places are very lived in and, you know, serve a functional purpose other than being a video game level. Which, to me, is the sort of thing that I really do like. I mean, I'm all for a set of platforming challenges like anybody else, but at the same time, though, there's nothing against a little bit of, you know, world building and level design. I don't know, maybe that's just me. I mean, it's just more so something I've noticed from a lot of people who tend to enjoy platformers of that. They either tend to be one way or the other about this sort of situation, where it's more so about, oh, it's about gameplay, challenges, the sort of Nintendo mindset where everything exists solely as a challenge and core focus of the game, compared to a lot of, I think, what Sony was doing typically in, you know, providing more so experience... well, I don't want to say experience-based platformers, because that sounds kind of like pressing the circle to enter the vault code. But it's more so in the sense of, I guess, creating something that kind of sticks out compared to your average platformer, which, by the early 2000s, I think was starting to dip out a little bit, because you began to see crosses between the genre, like in the case of Ratchet and Clank, which had more of a third-person shooter thing going for it, Jak and Daxter, which had very much of a GTA thing going about it, and then Sly Raccoon dipping into the stealth genre. Which is what I really miss from platformers, to be perfectly honest with you. I really miss that sort of genre diversity, which you don't really seem to see nowadays. Like, I mean, for a lot of 3D platformers, I mean, if it's not the whole sort of, yo, it's charming, look at how charming bouncy kid in fucking Hat World is, whatever sort of game it is, it's typically that sort of Nintendo-esque Banjo-Kazooie whatever sort of game, which, you know, fair enough that for them trying to breathe life into a genre that hasn't really had a lot of life breathed into it for a good number of years, but at the same time, though, it ain't my generation of games, so I don't give a shit. Well, I mean, I say that in jest mostly, but, you know, I would like a revival of, you know, the Ratchet and Clank era. Well, I'd say more so the extreme dude era of, you know, 3D platformers with guns and extreme rock music and stuff. I don't know, maybe that's just me being a little bit biased, but that's just the era that I grew up in, and it's the era that I want back. Damn it. Anyway, an interesting thing about this level is that this actually reuses the hub world theme for Sir Raleigh's area. For what reason, I don't really know. I'm trying to think back, because I believe in the HD collection this actually just plays the overworld theme for the Panda Kings. I might be wrong on that, because it's been a while since I've taken a look at the HD collection since, well, the Ms. Ruby boss fight, which kind of made me rage quit a little bit. But, yeah, it's a bit bizarre. I mean, I will say, overall, as I mentioned before, the soundtrack of Sly Raccoon is probably one of my favourites in the series, mostly for its diversity, but in the PS2 version they do tend to reuse some tracks, and it's not even that they're necessarily bad, it's just track reusal, which isn't necessarily lazy, although I will take it in a heartbeat over some of the, I guess, the left motifs of Sly 2, which, again, I want to reiterate, I don't think are bad, I just think is done a little bit too often. Like, I mean, the only thing I remember of Sly 2's soundtrack, above anything else, is da-na-na-da-na-na-na-na, which is a fine theme, just I don't like it being reused so often, you know. This level, I will say, though, again, it's fine. It's a sort of level which I can't really put into words, but again, it's enjoyable. Although the one thing that I do remember, especially with this section, is from the SGP Likes to Play episode where they talked about Jackie Chan teaching future people. I don't know. Best not to reference other playthroughs when you're in the middle of your own commentary. Regardless of such, though, I think this is the section I was actually talking about earlier, the one that is impossible to go through without the invisibility power-up. It's not necessarily that hard, because I do believe you can hide behind the boxes, so there is a workaround to it. It's just more so about trying to time yourself correctly. Anyway, it's time for more slide trivia, because I seem to be running out of a lot of things to say. I mean, this level I think is probably more, I wouldn't say fun to play than it is to watch or listen to somebody commentate over, but when it comes to speaking about it, this level it really is that sort of thing where you just like to get immersed in the silence, which kind of defeats the purpose of the commentary. Which has actually crossed my mind more than a few times today, because I was actually thinking about what sort of games I'd like to talk over and what sort of games that I'd love to, I guess, share with other people, but there are some that I think that I do want to share with people, but at the same time I think a better experience than it is to commentate over. Which is something I noticed actually with some commentaries over Silent Hill 2. Because, like, I mean, I get the impression that Silent Hill as a game is better experience than it is hearing somebody talk about it, which is something that I did sort of feel with my Silent Hill 3 commentary. Not all the time, mind you, because I think that did go a little bit better than Silent Hill 1. Well, then again, that was me when I was just starting out, so obviously. But at the same time, though, there is something to be said where the atmosphere and the mystique of everything is best experienced, and I think coming back to the game after you've experienced it, to hear somebody else, I guess, also share a sense of perspective about it is probably the best sort of approach you can give. Which is why I'm gonna put off Silent Hill 2 for now, and probably try with one of the other games later on, just so I can get some experience and try and see what sort of approach to a Silent Hill game works for the best. I don't know, it's a bit of a learning experience actually, because I also found that sort of thing also happening with the Doom 3 commentary, where the ambience of Doom 3 is fantastic, and I think it is a game that's better experienced and commentated over. But that being said though, again, that's a bit of a learning experience. But with Sly Raccoon, for example, it's the sort of thing where I think you can critique level design and talk about the game and talk about the story and all that sort of stuff, in a far greater context than you ever could with, you know, well, I guess a horror game, which I guess are more so meant to be designed as the anti-commentary games. Well, I mean, you have your stuff like, you know, your Slender or your Five Nights at Freddy's or whatever, your horror game of the week, essentially. But I do think it is possible to talk over them, it's just about what sort of style you do. And in the case of Sly Raccoon, again, stuff like this, I mean, this leading to the invisibility power-up. Delving into the development history I also feel is, again, very integral to also learning about how things were changed throughout the level, which I guess makes these commentaries as much of a learning experience for me as it probably, or at least I hope it is for you. I think this is also a level where I think the clue bottles can also be pretty deceptive, because this is actually the... Well, on a test playthrough actually, this was the level that I had the most trouble with finding the clues in, but, yeah, it seems to be pretty decent this time around. In fact, I'd say when it comes to collecting clue bottles, it is probably best that you just kind of go through them at your leisure, or try and get the ones that you can find easily. Again, I wouldn't necessarily recommend a guide, because I don't think they have, you know, the complexity of, say, like a Sega Master System game where, you know, it's like, oh, that blade of grass is my only way out, I guess I better bomb this wall that I had no idea how to bomb. It's not that sort of complexity, it's just more so something that will trip you up on the occasion, and even then, it does ease up the moment you get the blueprints, which help tremendously and are a great way of having an in-game guide to help you out when you need it most. It's just the search for them when you're playing, which will get you frustrated the most. Anyway, like, I mean, with stuff like this here, I don't necessarily see why players would have had that much hard of a time. Well, that much hard of a time. Jesus, what are you saying, mate? I don't think you would have that much of a difficult time, although, then again, I suppose it is also important to mention that these are people who probably never played Sly Raccoon. Well, they didn't play Sly Raccoon before, and there was an untested, I guess a much buggier version of the game, so they were probably playing a version of the game that was a lot less stable than what we're seeing in front of us. I don't know. It's just interesting to see how games can change so radically between ports, because, I mean, ports, I should say, between the pre-release to the final release, because I mean, when you see things like, you know, again, I was actually looking at the Doom 3 leaked alpha version from 2002, and seeing the difference between that game and compared to what we would later get for the final release, Again, it really does go to show that things can change so radically. Well, some for better, some people would argue, and some for the worse, but in any case, it is always something to think about, and now that we have finally wasted enough time, we will finally get the last clue. If we can get up there. Come on. Sly, use the Force. The Force! And we finally have them. Now, let us press the circle to enter the vault code. And I believe here is where we get the blueprints. Or I might be wrong, or we might be getting a certain other power-up, which I will have to briefly talk about, because I think this might be probably one of the more bizarre power-ups in the game.
You found the blueprints for the Panda King's lair. I'll upload the data straight into your binocucom.
Okay, so it's not the power-up I was thinking of. Well, never mind. Actually, we might have skimmed that over before. But in any case, I'll probably talk about it later if I have literally nothing else to talk about, but in any case, now we have a callback to the first level. Just avoiding the lasers should be child's play at this point, especially with a slow down power-up, which would oops. Well, on that fumbly note, I am Solidus-Skully, keep a new metal, and next time on the Sly Raccoon commentary, we'll be finishing off the Panda King's Hubworld, so catch you later. Bye-bye.